Anyone that keeps track of new and current MMOs will be more than aware that Star Wars: The Old Republic, which was hailed as the best chance of knocking World of Warcraft off its pedestal, has bombed hard. It started off as well as any new MMO could. It sold 1 million copies in its first week, making it the biggest MMO launch ever, but within a few months they were down 400,000 subscribers, and that number just continues to increase. Star Wars: The Old Republic needs something to keep it from disappearing into obscurity, and I have a few ideas that may or may not help with that. In order of least important to most, this is what I would like to see change. Number 10. More emphasis on story with less linearity. SWTOR was built as a story-driven game, similar to the Knights of the Old Republic games that came before it. However, the story in SWTOR is incredibly dull after the first time you play it, and it is way too linear. The only thing you ever really care about is your class story, because that's the only thing that ever affects your character. Every other quest, mission, whatever you want to call it, is just another variation of the classic MMO quests. You kill 10 of these, you collect 5 of those, you click this. The only thing that makes it stand out is the voiceover and the cinematics. But after one playthrough this becomes entirely tedious, and unless you really like voiceover, you skip them, with maybe the exception of the class quest, unless you've done that before and then that gets skipped as well. We've learned in 1.3 there will be legacy features which allow you to level up faster using different methods. So if you want to purely PvP to level, you can buy an experience boost to that. Or if you want to quest, a boost for that as well. This does go a long way of fixing the problem of alts and the boring side story quests. However, I don't think it goes far enough. There needs to be a way to make the story different each time you level an alt, or at least enough variations that you can do it 3 or 4 times without experiencing the exact same storyline. Whatever choice you make in the conversation wheel, you always end up with the same conclusion, with very few exceptions in the light and dark side options. You need to give us less linearity, and this will give us extra incentive to level our alts and keep us around playing longer. Number 9. Faction neutral classes. If you enjoy following the story of Star Wars, you'll know all about those groups of self-interested people out in the galaxy who are only in it for the credits. Of course, in SWTOR these people are the smugglers and the bounty hunters. I think BioWare really missed an opportunity to allow the players of these classes choose which faction they want to play for. It could have easily been done through a quest. I mean, let's say you're on a contested planet, you fight against both Republic and Empire, and in the end they both offer you a job. It's pretty simple. And if you really like these classes, it gives you the option to have 2 different stories to play through. I know a lot of people would then scream BioWare favoritism, but this then gives them the option to add in new classes, like a neutral trader pure support class for example. It just adds to the flavour of the game and gives it the impression that the developers gave it a lot of thought. Number 8. Faster content updates. Star Wars: The Old Republic is supposed to be a story-driven game. It's the main feature the game was sold on. The first time you play through the game, this is great. The climax to your class story is generally entertaining for the most part, and it leaves you wanting to know what could happen next. The problem is that a lot of people blew through the story content of their first character pretty quickly, and some of these people didn't want to do endgame. So they decided to level another character, but the side quests are so tedious and dull that these people decide that they can't face leveling another character and then quit. We've seen it already. I'm sure a large portion of the 400,000 subscribers that quit the game did so for this very reason. What BioWare need to do to remedy this is take a look at other story-driven games like point-and-click adventures such as Back to the Future and The Walking Dead. They regularly update their games with new content for them to play, and the same needs to happen in SWTOR. More frequent, smaller updates to the class story will be a sure way to keep a lot of the subscribers interested in the game in the long run. Number 7. Non-humanoid race characters. If you play SWTOR, you either play a human or a different coloured human. The character creation is incredibly underwhelming. Only a handful of races to choose from, and they're all just slightly different coloured variations of each other. I'm aware that BioWare are adding in the Cathar, which are slightly less humanoid, but again, they're just humanoid. I mean, I for one would love to play a Jawa or even a droid. It's already been shown in game that droids can gain sentience, and I know a Jawa, well, anything doesn't really make much sense story-wise. But then again, neither does a pure-blood Sith Jedi. It's probably not the most pressing issue, but more variety in a game full of the same old is never a bad thing. Number 6. Small-scale competitive PvP or arena. Now, I know a lot of you are going to disagree with me about this, but in other games like WoW, I preferred arena as my form of competitive play. Instead of two big groups of players going up against each other, I personally believe that small-scale PvP, such as arena, allows for personal skill to play more of a role. In SWTOR, there are many arguments against adding this kind of PvP. One of the major ones is the main reason a lot of people from World of Warcraft would be against it. The developers use the arena, or whatever other small-scale PvP, as their means of balance, and disregard the other forms such as war zones. However, the game itself is already pretty homogeneous. I mean, nearly every advanced class has the same utility already, whether it's snares or stuns or knockbacks and damage mitigation. And these nearly always provide the same advantage. So from the perspective of crowd control, there isn't really much class balancing needed. There are a few issues surrounding damage balance, but I would argue that Arena would actually improve this. I mean, for example, we can use the Pyrotech or Vanguard right now. They have the ability to kill someone within 6 seconds of taking them on, which in war zones is a real pain and could potentially make you lose. However, this isn't tracked as well as it would be in an arena setting, because if you kill someone that fast in arena, it's a complete game breaker, and the spec would be fixed accordingly. Of course, it won't be perfect. Just like any other MMO, class balance is incredibly difficult, but I believe that given some time and enough chance to get a good balance, it could prove to be awesome. Number 5. Mini-games. I'm sure I'm not the only one who sat around in the fleet waiting for a queue to pop up or trying to find a group to a flashpoint. It would be nice to try and have something to do while we were waiting. Any fans of the Knights of the Old Republic series will be more than familiar with mini-games such as Berserk. It's a card game that you can play with your companion. However, in Star Wars The Old Republic, with it being a multiplayer game, this gives us the option to play against others, and for us to put our credits where our mouths are. You could even turn it into a trading card game, with rare cards dropping from certain monsters. And if we can gamble using the card games, there's a massive variety of things we can have to do to pass the time. In Star Wars Galaxies, there were mini-games such as the Jubilee Wheel and Lubjack. We could also have games with the Jack, which is the chess-like game from Star Wars A New Hope. And I know that there are a lot of people calling for some kind of racing game, whether it's a pod-style racing game or just modified speeders. I think it was a huge mistake by BioWare to leave these things out, and with a little bit of imagination, this could turn into a whole new part of gameplay. Hell, some people may even stay subscribed purely to play these games alone. Number 4. Improved space combat. I know I'm in a minority when saying this, but I actually kinda enjoyed space combat the first time round. Graphically it's pretty cool, flying through the debris fields and watching planets being ripped apart. I like the idea of having to upgrade your ship with new parts to make it more powerful, and it's pretty simple and straightforward. But in the end, it got very, very tedious and repetitive. The tunnel vision approach, without freedom of movement, is like something from an old school Master System game. With the technology at their disposal, they have the opportunity to make space combat something really, really good. It just needs a complete overhaul. Make it so you have complete freedom of movement. I mean, I'm not talking about turning it into a flight sim or ace combat, but the ability to move wherever you want is an absolute must. And with this could potentially come a PvP element. Dogfighting against the opposite faction on one of those epic backdrops with an awesome soundtrack, who wouldn't want to play that? I'd also like to see them lift the class restriction on what ships you get as well. I hate the fact that my trooper is stuck with such a crappy ship when the Imperial Agent one is so amazing looking. Being able to earn more powerful ships through PvP or standard PvE combat would be something I would really like, and the ability to customise your ship appearance, adding an engine here or a new blaster turret there, would go a long way to hugely improving this very lacklustre part of the game. And like I mentioned with the minigames, if you do this correctly, it could potentially turn into a whole new path of progression, and it would get a community of players who subscribe purely for this element of the game. Number 3. A proper achievement system with local and guild announcement. If you've played one of those other MMOs like Rift or World of Warcraft, then you'll be very familiar with their achievement system. When you complete an achievement, you get a pop-up on your screen with a pleasant little ding sound, and it's announced to the people around you and your guild. This kind of positive reinforcement is exactly the kind of thing that SWTOR needs to keep people interested. I know that there will be those that will complain about the need achievement to do this, people that play World of Warcraft right now, but I still believe the benefits outweigh the potential negatives. I'm aware that they have the codex, but this doesn't go far enough. Every now and then you get a private pop-up of something relatively uninteresting and it barely even catches your attention. Now, I'm not saying get rid of the codex entirely. The information it provides on stuff can be useful, and it is a cool feature to have. But as a gamer, I know how other gamers think. The reason people compete is for bragging rights. In other games, I know people who held off getting achievements till there were the maximum amount of people online in their guild, purely because they wanted to show off that they got this achievement. If they added this in, it would provide a secondary thread of progression for players that were interested, and give us a lot more to do outside of queuing for war zones and finding flashpoint groups. Hell, I'll be honest, I'd be happy if they just straight copied the system World of Warcraft uses, because I believe they do it very well, especially with a point score like the achievement points from WoW or a gamer score from Xbox. This gives people an accumulated number for others to see, and for those people who have it to brag about. More healthy competition between players is always welcome, and will provide extra incentive to keep on paying that sub fee. Number 2. Dual Spec. I play one of the many hybrid advanced classes in SWTOR, that being the Commando, so I have the ability to heal, or DPS, but my main focus in SWTOR is PvP, and I absolutely despise healing in PvP. I'm no good at it, and I just generally hate it. However, I do quite enjoy healing in PvE. I've been on the fleet so many times where they've been wanting healers for flashpoints, and I just had to leave it because I need to keep my spec as it is for PvP, or they can't be bothered waiting for me to change my spec. Having the ability to just swap your talents out on the fly to another spec is pretty much a staple feature in the MMO market right now. I was really surprised when I found out SWTOR launched without it. With the introduction of the looking for group tool, this problem's been alleviated somewhat, but it still doesn't change the fact that less people will be willing to play an off-spec if they don't have the convenience to just quickly change around. Not to mention that people won't be able to queue for multiple roles, which will just keep the queues long. There's also the issue of operations to consider too. There are many fights right now that only need one tank, but you have to bring 2 tanks for other bosses. So you have to have a tank do poor DPS and possibly hit in rage timers, or kick one of the tanks out and bring in a DPS. The jump in difficulty from Karaga's Palace and Eternity Vault to Explosive Conflict is pretty steep, and if there is any indication of what's to come, group composition for Nightmare modes is going to become very important, and if dual spec isn't introduced, then you're just going to be shutting players out of future content. It limits the developers' options when designing fights, which is never a good thing, and it just disincentivizes players to carry on. Dual spec needs to be added sooner rather than later, or things are just going to get worse. Number 1. Cross-server or superservers. This is something I feel that the game needs more than anything. BioWare have just recently made an effort to try and implement some stealth server merges to attempts to help the serious problems of server population, because there is no greater threat to an online game than having no one else to play with. Before 1.3 there were more people PvPing than anything else at endgame, purely out of the convenience of being able to just queue up for war zones anywhere, anytime. But yet there were still issues on a lot of servers with queue times, and now with the introduction of the looking for group tool and ranked war zones,
All those people who were queuing for Warzones are going to be distributed across 3 different queues now, which is just going to make it even worse. The only way this is not going to become a major problem in the future is if they implement cross-server queuing, or they create super servers where they bundle everyone into the same servers with different instances of areas. So in theory they only really need 4 servers, a PvP one, another PvE one, RP PvP one, and an RP PvE one. We've already seen the technology in game with them using separate instances in areas when the game launched, and there was 100 people on each planet. I'm probably the furthest thing from a computer genius, but from what I understand it wouldn't take much more effort to create this kind of system. This would be my preferred method of them handling the issue of server populations, and it would help sate the people who are strongly against the concept of cross-server. I have the suspicion that BioWare intentionally did this to make it like the old classic World of Warcraft, when there were smaller communities of people, all who knew each other, and it does promote a good spirit of competition. The people in my guild now know a lot of the good Imperial guilds and players, but the queues just aren't fast enough. If there was enough people to sustain it per server, then this wouldn't be an issue, and it is a shame because I wish it could be like that, but even the big boys went cross-server eventually, and most new MMOs start out with cross-server already implemented. I don't know if it was just pure arrogance or they just believed their own hype, but they really made a huge mistake opening up so many servers at launch. And I hope they'd listen to their player base and realise just how big of a problem that this really is. So that's my 10 suggestions for BioWare to try and make SWTOR something good. There are a lot of little things that they could do to help improve it, but there are just too many big issues with the game right now. I feel like it has so much potential and it could be a truly great game, but unless they start doing some major changes, it's just going to end up the way of Warhammer Online and into the depths of obscurity. I don't think anyone playing right now wants that. Feel free to let me know if you think I missed anything that's more important in the comments below, and let's see if we can help BioWare.